For as long as I can remember, Bully has lived in that strange space where everyone agrees that it deserved more. Any discussion about Rockstar eventually circles back to it, usually followed by the same conclusion. They should have made Bully 2. I've always bought into that idea without really questioning it, so replaying Bully in 2026 wasn't about chasing nostalgia as much as it was about checking whether that feeling actually holds up once you sit down and play the game again. The first thing that stands out is how immediately dated the game looks. There's no gentle easing back into this one. The character models make sure of that. Facial expressions are incredibly stiff, they're exaggerated, and they're often completely detached from what the scene is trying to convey. Conversations are filled with frozen grins and wide-eyed stares that feel unintentionally surreal. It's the kind of thing you either laugh at or get distracted by, and I definitely found myself doing both. Visually, this is very much a product of its time. Tonally, Bully is all over the place, and somehow I'm completely fine with that. It swings between moments that take school hierarchy and authority seriously, and others that feel like they belong in a cartoon. One minute, the game is grounded and oddly sincere, the next is leaning into slapstick and juvenile humour. It never fully commits to either direction, and instead exists somewhere in the middle, which gives it a strangely comforting rhythm. That inconsistency actually adds to the coziness. The game feels small, self-contained, and unconcerned with modern expectations. You're not being pushed towards epic stakes or constant escalation. You are just inhabiting this slightly exaggerated version of school life, with all its pettiness, its drama, and its absurdity. Even when it feels rough around the edges, it's the kind of roughness that still feels more familiar than frustrating. Revisiting this game with fresh eyes now, the idea of a sequel starts to feel a lot more complicated. Wanting Bully 2 makes sense, but Bully was never beloved because it was technically impressive or perfectly polished. Its charm comes from how all these mismatched elements sit together, the awkward visuals, the uneven tone, the quiet moments between everything, and that is where the nostalgia goggles start to slip a little bit. The question shifts from why didn't this get a sequel to would smoothing this out and modernising it actually make it better? That's where the gameplay becomes really important, because once the initial impressions fade, what you're left with is how Bully actually plays moment to moment. Once you settle into Bully, the gameplay stops feeling like a collection of systems and starts feeling a lot like a routine, and that routine is where the game quietly does something quite special. You wake up in your dorm, you step outside into Bulworth, you check the time and start making small decisions about how you want your day to unfold. Maybe you head straight to class, maybe you squeeze in a mission first, maybe you just wander around for a bit. Eventually, the day winds down and you head back to your dorm to sleep, ready to do it again. It is simple, but it is surprisingly soothing. The time element plays a huge role in why this works. Days always have structure. You can't do everything at once, and the game never really asks you to. Instead, it encourages you to live within its rhythm. Classes happen at set times, you have a curfew, and nighttime does feel genuinely different from daytime. There is a sense of flow to it all that modern open world games often, not always, but often avoid, preferring constant availability instead. Bully feels comfortable in telling you that some things can wait until tomorrow. Classes are a big part of that daily loop, and even though they are built around these mini-games such as the art game, which is a weird snake thing, or English, where you just have to pick a bunch of words, as someone that did English at university, I absolutely loved that game. Passing a class does more than just tick a box and move you to the next one. It gives you a tangible benefit that carries forward, such as improved accuracy or more effective apologies to the prefects. Over time, those small improvements do stack up, and you start to feel like you are genuinely progressing through school rather than just unlocking content. Missions fit neatly into the structure because you're always aware of how much time you have left in a day. You start thinking in terms of, I can squeeze in one mission before class starts, or I can probably fit this mission in before the curfew. That limitation makes each day feel more intentional. Instead of burning through content in one session, you are encouraged to pace yourself. There is a natural stopping point built into the design, which makes coming back the next day feel inviting rather than overwhelming, because you know there is something you want to do today that you didn't have time to do yesterday. The seasonal structure of the chapters adds even another layer to this. Each chapter takes place in a different season, and this does wonders for keeping the game feeling fresh, even though you are in the same spaces. Autumn brings Halloween decorations, which is cool. The Halloween level is pretty fun, you just go around pranking people, awesome stuff. Winter rolls in with Christmas lights in chapter 3, you got the snow, there's a big shift in mood. It's just really, really nice to see a game think, oh, well now it's winter, so we're going to actually change how the world looks. I don't feel like enough games actually do this. All of this does come together to create a game that feels content to exist at its own pace. Bully is not in a rush, and it doesn't pressure you to be in one either. The routine, the time limits, the seasonal chapters, and the smaller scale in general all work together to make Bullworth feel like a place you are literally in, rather than a place you are there to just complete stuff in. It is definitely not a backdrop, it is part of everything. But now for the combat and the general moment-to-moment gameplay. I think this is quite fairly simple, but they fit the setting quite well. Fistfights are incredibly scrappy and chaotic, but rarely comfortable, mostly due to the aging controls. Locking on feels awkward, punching never feels consistent, although there are a decent amount of combos that you can learn through school or by bringing parts to the hobo who lives at the school, because of course there's a hobo that lives at the school that teaches you moves. You can also probably cheese about 90% of the game with the slingshot, other than a couple bosses that won't let you use it, or certain enemies that don't get stunned long enough. The story in Bully is where things start to feel a little bit looser, and not always in a way that feels intentional. There is technically a through line here, but most of the time it feels like you aren't following a clear narrative and more like you're being passed from one problem to the next. For a huge portion of this game, your motivation is basically just go and deal with these people, and you don't always get much reason to question it. Chapter 1 does a solid job of setting things up. You arrive at Bullworth, you're immediately at the bottom of the social ladder, you're introduced to the idea that this school runs on hierarchy and cliques. Authority figures are useless, all of the students are divided, and you, Jimmy, are dropped into the middle of it all. It is a strong starting point, and it feels like the game is gearing up to explore that power struggle in quite a focused way. Then the game kind of doesn't do that. Chapters then come and go, each one focusing mainly on fighting or helping one of the cliques. There isn't always a strong personal stake, and the consequences rarely linger. You will dismantle an entire clique, move on to the next chapter and barely look back. It works structurally, but narratively it can feel a bit disconnected, like a series of episodes rather than one continuous story. What makes this more noticeable is that the game clearly remembers its original setup by the time Chapter 5 rolls around. Suddenly, threads from the beginning come back into focus, motivations are clarified once more, and there is a sense that things are being wrapped up properly now. It is effective, but it also highlights how much of the middle of the game feels like filler by comparison. You spend so long doing odd jobs, settling grudges, and fighting proxy battles that the main conflict almost fades into the background. That inconsistency would normally be a bigger problem, but Bully seems strangely unbothered by it. The story feels more like an excuse to keep the routine moving than something that actually demands your full attention. Characters do come and go, but I don't think you're really given much time to sit with the consequences of that. I don't think the game really expects you to care much either. It's messy and it definitely lacks focus, but I also feel like it matches the game's day-to-day structure. Coming back to Bully after nearly 20 years, I can say pretty confidently that I enjoyed it. I liked settling back into that routine, I liked the smaller scale, and I liked spending time in a world that isn't a constant rush to entertain me. But I'm also very aware of why that enjoyment exists. I enjoyed Bully because I already knew Bully. I knew its rhythms, its rough edges, and what it was going to be, even when it didn't always work. I don't think a brand new player in 2026 would have that same experience. Without that familiarity, a lot of Bully's charm risks coming across as friction. The stiff visuals, the uneven story, the limited combat, the enforced routine, these are things that I've learned to appreciate over time, not things that immediately impress. Playing it again feels like revisiting a place you already understand, not like discovering something new. It becomes very, very clear that Bully was never meant to be GTA in a school, even if that's how it often gets wrongly described. It feels more like Rockstar's estranged child from a previous marriage. It's related, it's recognisable, but it's very much doing its own thing. It's smaller, it's stranger, it's a lot more awkward, and it's far less interested in typical gaming conventions. That's exactly why it works for some people, and exactly why I don't think it would land for everyone. I would still love to see Bully 2. The idea of returning to Bullworth or something like it is undeniably appealing, but I think a lot of the demand for it is built on memory rather than reality. A modern Bully would exist in direct opposition to so many design philosophies that contemporary games swear by. It would be slower, it would be more restrictive, it would be less reactive to your impulses, and it would be far more comfortable in telling you no. It wouldn't chase constant engagement or infinite progression, and it wouldn't easily slot into the current landscape. And because of that, I'm not convinced it would be received the way people think it would. The very things that make Bully special, its routine, its limitations, its awkwardness, are the same things that would be picked apart today by modern gaming media. Revisiting it now makes that clearer than ever. So maybe Bully works best as what it already is, a strange, slightly uneven game that belongs to a very specific moment in Rockstar's history, and to a very specific group of players who were there for it the first time. I'm glad I went back, I'm glad it still works for me, I'm just not sure it needs to come back for everybody else. If you made it this far into the video, then I would just like to say thank you very much, and I really hope that you enjoyed yourself. If you did, then leaving a like on the video really helps, and a comment telling me you enjoyed it would really make my day. If you want to see more videos from me, then you could always consider subscribing, because I upload at least one video a week. A couple weeks ago, I played Red Dead Redemption in 2026, so if you want more Rockstar goodness, go and watch that one. But for now, that is all. Have a nice day, and goodbye.